Thank you. Thank you. Well. Who the fuck? Hey, so it's such a pleasure to be here. Unity is a very global company. We're also a very Finnish company. We have a big office here. And I'm just really, really impressed by you guys running this conference. So anyway, VRTF, what is going on here? This new thing is really something that's, I think, going to shake the world. And it's shaking the companies. It's shaking our hearts. I want to talk a little bit about the VR, what I know, which is not very much, what I believe, which is a lot, and then a few things that we're doing about it. Okay? So everyone is going crazy over VR. It's kind of scary to see, and crazy is really the operative word here. I was talking to one of the major VC firms in the world recently, and not a VC firm that is famous for doing kind of crazy technical stuff, just a very kind of conservative, old-fashioned, good VC firm. And this partner tells me, 10% of the deals we're looking at are VR deals. And I'm like, what the hell? Are you crazy? Do you mean like look at or see? And he said, no, look at, like the people we invite into the partnership. So there's a lot of people that are really going deep on this. And of course, billions of dollars are shifting hands in the pursuit of something that we don't even know what is yet. That's always a scary moment. The investments are gigantic and they're ahead of the curve. There's nothing there, as you know. That's always a crazy, strange moment to be part of an industry at, and I think it's something that almost everyone here is thinking about. So for instance, I was at a game industry conference, DICE, which is a great conference also, and there was 120 sort of executives in the room, and I asked, how many of you are not working on VR? And I got 3 hands, which is kind of weird, right? So anyway, I think there's one statement that I'm going to make that I think is really true, which is that if you're doing VR right now, you're probably doing it wrong. And I'll try to argue for that in the next few minutes, right? So anyway, my agenda is simple: what I know, what I believe, and what Unity is doing about it. Okay? So what do I know? It's really not a lot. So VR is the final frame, right? It's, since the beginning of computing, we've been sort of searching for the frame to kind of capture different things, different screens in our pockets, on the walls, and so on. And VR kind of promises to be the final frame, the one that can never be kind of beaten. And I think that's really why the companies are going so crazy over it. It's unbelievably emotional. And the first time I tried VR, Brent and Iribe from Oculus brought the headset to our office, and I was kind of skeptical, because I'm very, very skeptical in general over sort of gaming peripherals. I think they're mostly shit. And so he brought this to our office, and I tried it on, and it was this kind of intense emotional experience. I did not want to leave. So my daughter is 3.5 years old now. One of her favorite games is to go under a blanket with me and just sort of hide. And I look at her face in there, and she's sort of quivering with excitement. And that's the kind of excitement I think most people feel when they go into VR. Also telling me that it's going to be single player, but also multiplayer. Kind of going into these experiences together is something that really has a lot of promise, just based on that kind of instinctual heartbeat, the heart is racing. VR is going to be all consumer for a long time. I'm very skeptical of kind of industrial uses. Also for this reason, it's just such an overwhelming experience. I don't think you'll be paying people to do this most of the time. And finally, a pure 3D platform. Unity, we've been so tired of every time there's a new platform, the first sort of wave, the first 2 waves are 2D. Like it's all kind of Angry Birds. And we're okay at 2D, but finally something where like the technology can really shine, and where the sort of skills of this ecosystem can really kind of stand out. I think that's fantastic. It's a bit more. 95% of what I see is built with Unity, Palmer Luckey this spring. So we know that we are the biggest player in this ecosystem by far. That also means that all the first parties are using Unity as a primary tool, which is exciting. Also puts a lot of responsibility on our shoulders. And the VR ecosystem will be defined by this community. That's exciting. It's also scary. I'll get back to what we're doing about it later. That's all I know. So what I believe is a few things. So VR will be one of the main interaction modes in the future, in the near future, alongside mobile, desktop, and AR. That's it, right? So it's going to be one of these core experiences. It will help save the world. So my good friend Hilmar Vegar, who is the CEO of CCP, argues this strongly, and I kind of buckle under his convincing arguments, which are that over time, we cannot all go to the mountaintop. We can not all visit Mount Everest. That will destroy Mount Everest. So instead, you have Solfar creating Mount Everest as a VR experience. This is really important. We don't have enough gas to fly everyone around the world, so we'll have to spend a significant amount of our time inside VR if we want to have good lives. So this is going to happen very clearly. And it's going to blow our minds. There will be so many use cases that are not there yet, not clear yet, that are just going to be completely standard as part of our lives in a few years. It's going to be risky as hell, right? So if you're starting a VR company, absolutely please do ensure that you have funding or stability for at least 2 to 4 years, because it's going to be very hard to survive the first waves of devices coming out. Some of this is going to fail, I don't know what, but something is not going to work. There'll be deaths that is going to push this back in some markets. There'll be regulation. There'll be all kinds of problems. So just have enough funding to have the stability to kind of get to the goal whenever it arrives. And search for VR native products. So search for this kind of Angry Birds of VR. The next thing is expect to have your expectations reset every few months, right? So something you think makes sense, half a year later is not going to make sense. So that's the search. You will have to kind of be in there, being totally exposed to what's going on. When I go back to the early days of the iPhone, we saw the same, right? Like games, applications that came out on the iPhone, you could almost see which quarter they were built in, based on how the interaction was made, how the gameplay was made, how social was implemented, how graphics were made, and so on. This is also going to happen here, and if you're falling behind even by a few months, you can be completely irrelevant. So that's what we all have to kind of ensure we're not. Also, something that's not been talked enough about, I think, is that the VR ecosystem will have very aggressive proprietors. Well, that means that the companies behind VR will try some nasty shit, okay? They will control content and retail. Not all of them, not in every way, but they will try their darndest, right? They will control social and discovery. Of course, one of the big proprietors is Facebook. There's a number of other proprietors coming out there, and they're going to be very, very careful in controlling the ecosystem. As we went from PC to mobile, there was a massive kind of regaining of control. Suddenly, like, the control of the ecosystem was 100 times larger than it had been with PC. I think we'll see another similar shift to sort of more control in this new ecosystem. I think that's a real problem. It's going to be scary. It means that a lot of really cool business ideas will not work, or will at least be severely sort of stalled and damaged. So this is going to be something that we have to be aware of. And the last thing, which I can only see the contours of this so far, it's kind of the scariest if VR becomes like a primary mode of being, and that is that they're going to control or try to control the metaverse, which basically will match reality. So again, as in this world, we're doing 3D printing, we're doing a lot of things where consumers can take control over physical reality. Here you'll have spaces where large corporations will control what can even be rendered in there. They will actually be able to control, which shapes, which objects can even exist. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but it's something to really watch, and it actually just, it genuinely scares me. So what are we going to do about it? It's a few things. We're going to assume that VR will be as big or can be as big as mobile. So that's how we're going to invest in it. There will be no compromises for long-term quality. So we're kind of deliberately slow in our engineering. We don't want to go out there supporting just one platform and leaving the others behind. We're going to be broad and deliberate, have stable APIs, things, ways of working that will work across all the different devices as they evolve incredibly quickly, by the way. There will be technology, workflow, and platforms. I'll touch them in a second. And we'll be a neutral and kind of equalizing player, right? So we'll make sure that all the developers have access to all the devices, that developers don't get locked too deep into the silos of these big controlling players, which is also our role, by the way, in mobile. It's also our role in console. It's a role everywhere. So this is something we're going to take extremely seriously. Technology, there's a few things. Latency, we're going from the traditional way of doing rendering, where you're doing deeper and deeper buffering, to sort of anti-buffering. Even things like late latching, where basically you're rendering the scene, but as you're rendering it, you're actually going to update the location of cameras while the render pipeline is moving. It's a sort of a rewrite of a lot of assumptions that we've had for the last, very long time. Social screen, so you'll have like the desktop screen, PC screen, TV screen separate from the VR. You'll have single pass everything, so basically you'll have to take all the rendering and force it to kind of render 2 frames from one single command buffer, which is going to give us dramatic improvements of performance. In workflows, we're going to try to dumb it down to the single button, as we always try to do everything. But there'll be a bunch of other stuff. There'll be kind of, it turns out that working on VR outside of VR absolutely sucks. So what we have to do when we're working on is a VR remote, so you can basically be working, you can see the VR scene kind of as you go. You can also be editing inside VR, something we're kind of showing off a little bit already and will be a big thing in the future. And then also, based on the assumption that a lot of the things that will go on in there will be sort of not necessarily hardcore gaming, but sort of storytelling experiences, we want to make it so that it's going to be very easy to build those kind of experiences as well as the more hardcore ones. VR video is going to be a big thing. So linear media becomes interactive. That's a big kind of open question. There's a lot of research going into this in the industry, and we're doing a lot of it. This will be a really big use case. And we actually have never really announced this, but we did acquire a while ago some technology to do this, and we'll be showing our hand fairly soon on how that's going to look. It's really going to be a big deal for us. Then when it comes to platforms, we currently support Oculus, Gear VR, and PlayStation VR, but the assumption is that we will work on everything. And in fact, we are working on everything in the lab, one way or another, experimenting at least, probably already kind of dealing with the big players to make sure that there is this kind of sharing of technology, wisdom, and vision even. So kind of not just sort of supporting things superficially, but going deep in partnerships with the platforms, again, to make sure that the developers have full access and full freedom to have the technology early and really well. We're also doing a big VR conference, a Vision Summit in February in Hollywood, so it's going to be exciting for us. And finally, we are hiring. Here in Helsinki, we're hiring, I think we have like 10 open roles, but across the world we have a lot of open roles. Many of these are for VR and AR, so please, come and join us. Thank you so much.